This video will show you how to replace the oil pressure switch on a Mitsubishi Lancer with a 2.4-liter engine. This will be located along the front side of your engine, behind your air intake system. Let's get into it. Let's start removing the upper engine cover first by removing two 10mm bolts. Now we're making our way over towards the throttle body. We have our inlet tube. We're going to dislodge this. Now for this inlet tube, we're going to start at the breather hose that leads over towards the valve cover. Squeeze the clamp and we'll slide this hose out of place. I'm using some pliers. If you find the hose is stuck in place, you can use an angled hose pick. Once you have your hose disconnected, give it a quick squeeze, make sure it's soft and pliable. Now the inlet tube is held to the air filter housing with a clamp right up along here. We'll be using a 10mm to loosen the clamp enough that we could carefully pull this away from the air filter housing. On the other side of the tube, you have the same exact thing, holding it to your throttle body. Let's make our way down to the next piece of hardware. Let's get this lower one down here, just past the transmission dipstick. Let's take hold of that tube. Just going to give it a twist. Work this off of there, just a quick inspection of that, make sure it's not cracked in any way. Now I've removed my transmission dipstick and installed a protective plug so we have a clear view of where our electrical connector is on the throttle body itself. So we're starting with that electrical connector. It has a locking tab on the forward side. Just go ahead and squeeze that in and we'll lift this up and out of place. Now once you do have it disconnected, a quick inspection for corrosion, of course. We'll set that aside. Now this is attached to a bracket. We're not going to dislodge it from the bracket. We can remove the entire bracket with the other connector from the throttle body itself. Prior to doing that, there's a rubber hose that goes along this plastic clip. We're going to carefully dislodge it and then we'll continue on to that 10mm bolt. Just go ahead and carefully pull that right up and out of there. Now up in this corner is where the 10mm bolt is for this entire bracket. Once we have it dislodged, we'll try to pull this aside. That's what your throttle body bolts look like. Now we're making our way over towards the other side of the throttle body. Now we do have a wiring harness that goes across a bracket, but we're leaving that wiring harness on the metal bracket. We can't dislodge the bracket yet because the bolt is tucked in and behind this coolant hose. So we're going to remove the coolant hose from the throttle body. Keep in mind there will be coolant inside this area. We want to have a collection receptacle underneath the vehicle just in case any fluid makes its way down, but to help prevent that, we're going to be using some hose pliers, and we'll also use a small plug on the throttle body side. Prior to removing that coolant hose, we want to make sure we make our way over towards where the coolant cap is. We'll make sure it's cool to the touch, obviously it should be. We're going to carefully open this counterclockwise, pressing down and lifting up and away from our face. We just want to make sure there's no pressure in the cooling system. After that, we can just go ahead and close this back up again. We'll use the hose pliers to gently crimp this. We'll use some pliers for the clamp. While squeezing that in, we'll slide the hose out of place and then cap that throttle body. So I have my hose crimpers. I'm going to go on the far side of this wire. Just try to bring this in here. Apply light pressure on that hose. We don't want to cause any damage. We just want to restrict fluid flow. Now we'll go ahead and squeeze that clamp and remove the hose from the throttle body. Keep in mind there could be coolant in this area. We have our collection receptacle under here. Slide that hose off of there. Install my plug. Now just a quick inspection of our hose. We'll set that aside. We do not want to drain any more coolant than we have to. Now we'll be using a 12 millimeter for the bracket mounting bolt. See it right back here. Okay. There's our mounting bolt. Now we have two bolts holding this bracket in place to the throttle body. Those are also the bolts that hold the throttle body in place, so we can remove those. We'll continue on to the last mounting bolt for the throttle body afterward. Now we should be able to shift that bracket. There we are. We have our last bolt over in this corner for the throttle body itself. Once we have that dislodged, we're going to attempt to slide this throttle body over towards the front of the vehicle underneath our upper radiator hose. We just need it out of the way so we can gain access in that area. Take hold of that throttle body. Now we do still have a coolant hose attached to this. We are not dislodging that other coolant hose. We're only setting this aside. Continuing on, we need to make sure no miscellaneous debris falls inside the air intake system. I'm going to use a clean rag. We'll go ahead and give this a quick wipe, making sure there's nothing in there, and then we're going to protect the area prior to continuing on any further. Now I have my clean rag, no detergent, just a quick wipe. Now I'm going to protect the area. Now with that protected, we're going to focus again on our wiring harness that leads behind the air intake system. Now we can see that this wiring harness goes into a metal bracket. Just go ahead and take hold of that. We're going to separate it. We want to have some movement from this wiring harness. Now that we have that area protected, if you were to look deep inside this area, we can see where our knock sensor is located. Now just below that knock sensor, that's where our oil pressure switch is. Now as you can tell, it's going to be fairly difficult to go ahead and remove this. What we're going to have to do first is dislodge the knock sensor from the engine. There's a 10 millimeter bolt holding it in place. You want to be extremely careful with the knock sensor. Once you do have it dislodged, rest it aside. Make sure you do not damage it in any way. Prior to removing that bolt and removing the knock sensor from the engine, we want to pay attention to the orientation of that knock sensor. So during the installation process, we can have that knock sensor in as close to the same positioning as possible. Okay, feels like it's broken free now. There we are. We're going to remove that mounting bolt. Of course, we'll give it a thorough inspection as always. Take that knock sensor and we'll rest it aside. Now we have a clear view of our oil pressure switch just below that area. Let's continue on to that blue electrical connector you can see. Now for this electrical connector, it does have a locking tab which may be facing in pretty much any direction. Once you find that locking tab, use an angled pick, make your way under the tab, gently pry, and then we'll carefully pull this connector away from the oil pressure switch. Since it is difficult to get two hands behind this area, I'm using my angled pick and a pry bar. The pry bar is only going to be used to lightly pry this out of place if the pick can't do it. I'm pulling away on that locking tab. We should be able to slide the connector out and away as well. We'll give this electrical connector a quick inspection for corrosion and set it aside. Now we'll continue on with a 24 millimeter to remove the oil pressure switch from the engine. Prior to removing it, we want to make sure we clean the area so no miscellaneous debris makes its way into the engine oiling system. Now that we have that area cleaned, you could try removing the oil pressure switch, but typically you're going to find that you still need a little bit more room to gain access with a tool. Now looking up along this area, we can see that we have a wiring harness that leads up to this metal bracket. As far as the bracket's concerned, just go ahead and take hold of the wiring harness and the bracket and gently separate the two. Now we're going to carefully pull down on that wiring harness, moving it out of the way. To dislodge this bracket, you can see right where my finger is, there's a 12 millimeter bolt. Remove the bolt and the bracket. A quick inspection of our bracket here. That looks good. We have our mounting bolts. We'll set both of these aside. Now at this point, you're going to want to use a 24mm to start unscrewing that oil pressure switch from the engine. If you find you have a hard time getting a wrench in this area, you could try using some adjustable pliers or some locking pliers, whatever works best for you. We're turning this counterclockwise until it removes from the engine. There we are, it's starting to move for us. There it is, friend. Prior to installation of any brand new part, we always like to clean and inspect the mounting surface. For this, I'm going to use a clean piece of fine sandpaper. We'll give this a light scuffing. When cleaning this, we're not using any type of detergent which might make its way into the engine oiling system. A small scraper might be necessary for this. Now we have our clean rag. Let's give that a quick wipe. That looks good. Now it's time to install the brand new oil pressure switch. Look down at the threaded portion here where it goes into the engine. I've applied some thread sealant. Now that I have that on there, I'm going to get this in place. We're going to start it in by hand and we'll snug it up. Now the torque for this sensor is going to be 89 inch-pounds. It's really not very much. In this case, since we cannot get a torque wrench in this area, we're going to make sure it's snug using our pliers. Now for this sensor, once it feels as though it's snug, just take it a tiny bit further, maybe 1/8 of a turn. What you're going to find is that the base of the oil pressure switch does not hit directly up against the engine. There's actually still a little bit of threading still sticking out from the engine itself. Here's a quick look at our original. You can see the thread sealer covering the rest of the threads. The clean threaded part is the only part that went into the engine. It's time for our electrical connector. We're going to align the locking tab. We'll press this in and listen for a click. We want to make sure this is properly secured in place. Just have to get this lined up. There we are. We have an audible click. It does not slide out of place. We'll continue on with the knock sensor next. Prior to installing the knock sensor, we want to make sure we clean up the mounting area of the engine, and then we'll also just make sure that the back side of the knock sensor is clean as well. We need to have good mounting surface here. Now I have my fine sandpaper. Just give this a light scuffing. We don't want to cause any damage here. Just want to make sure it's a smooth surface. Now let's do the knock sensor. Okay, that looks good. We'll make sure we clean our mounting bolt as well, and then we can install the knock sensor. When we go to install the knock sensor, you need to make sure you have it in the proper orientation, the same direction it was facing during the removal process. Once we have it in that position, we're going to snug the bolt and torque it to 15 foot-pounds. That equates to 180 inch-pounds. Now you can see looking at the knock sensor, I have it in the proper orientation. You can go a little bit further down if necessary. You want to make sure it's not straight up and down and definitely not side to side. It needs to be diagonal. We'll have that in approximately a 45-degree angle. And now we can snug that bolt. Now I have my torque wrench. There we are. Let's take hold of that sensor and confirm it's properly secured. It should not move around in any way. That feels perfect. Now it's time for our small metal bracket held in place with our 12mm bolt. Now I already have the bolt on my 12mm socket. It just makes it a little bit easier to grab onto. Get this started in. Once you do have the bolt started in, we're going to make our adjustments to the bracket itself, confirming it's in the proper location, and then we'll go ahead and snug it up. You can see that inboard ear there that goes underneath this ridge. Now let's take that wiring harness and bring it up and over the bracket into its proper position. We'll make sure that's secured in place. Before we get our throttle body in place, let's make sure that we remove the plug from inside of the intake here. We don't want anything inside of there. We'll double check around the mounting area just to confirm that no miscellaneous debris has fallen in or around. Now we can start sliding our throttle body in place. I'm lifting up on the rearward bracket. Now I'm trying to align my mounting bolt ports here. We'll start in our 2 mounting bolts along the inboard side or the rearward side first. Now that I have both of those started in, we're leaving them loose. Let's continue on along the forward side. We have another bracket here. This is going to go right into this corner of the throttle body. Now at this point, we're going to take the mounting bolt, slide it through this bracket, through the throttle body, and into the intake. All right, that one started in. Next one. This is the only bolt that does not have a bracket. They're all started in. Let's go ahead and snug them up in a crisscross manner. Once they're snug, we're going to torque them to 84 inch-pounds. That one. Now that rearward bracket does still have one more 12mm headed mounting bolt that needs to be installed. It's going to go right behind this area here, underneath our wiring harness. Okay, right there's bottomed out. We're just going to take that a tiny bit further. We do want to make sure that bracket's secured properly. It's time for our coolant hose. Keep in mind, when you do remove your protective plug from the throttle body, coolant might make its way out of there. We'll try to be quick about this. A little bit of coolant. We'll make sure we slide that hose up into the proper position. I have it pressed on there as far as possible. Let's make sure we install the clamp. We want to see hose on both sides of that clamp. We'll just give that a little tug to confirm it's secured and remove our hose pliers. Double check to make sure you don't see any coolant leaking from this area, and let's continue on over along this area next. Now we remember that we dislodged the hose from this plastic bracket. Just go ahead and line it up and slide that in. It's fairly simple. We do have an electrical connector next for that throttle body. The locking tab faces towards the front of the vehicle. Line it up and press it on. Audible click, we'll give it a tug. Now, prior to installing our air inlet tube across the top of this area, it's going to be a little bit difficult to clean the coolant, so we're going to do that next. Obviously, we don't want anything making its way inside of the throttle body, which might lead into the engine. We're going to protect that area again. I'm just using a clean rag. I'm not pressing on the valve inside of the throttle body. That's extremely important. Now, continuing on, I'm going to clean this using compressed air, paying close attention around all of my coolant hoses. We've got that cleaned down. Get this out of here. Just double check, make sure nothing's inside of that throttle body. Now we can install our air inlet tube. This upper port is going to lead up towards the valve cover hose. Let's start down at the throttle body. We'll press this up against the throttle body as far as possible. Prior to tightening the clamp, let's make sure that we also adjust it so it can make its way up to that upper air filter housing as well. Pressing that on as far as possible. We'll flex this. That slides on. Let's continue on to our two clamps. Make sure they're nice and snug. You can do whichever one you want first. I'm just going to start with the top. Now, you don't want to over-tighten the clamp. You just need to make sure that your hose is properly secured. You don't want any dirty or unmetered air making its way into the engine. Let's continue on down to the lower clamp as well. This on here. Okay. Let's double check, make sure that's tight. Now we're making our way up to this area. Let's get that hose in place. Squeeze the clamp. Now, since I did remove my transmission dipstick and plug the tube, I'm removing the plug and installing my dipstick. Now it's time for our forward engine cover. Looking along the bottom of this, we have one locating tab. That locating tab will go into this circular port right in the center of the intake manifold. Let's line this up, slide it in, align the mounting bolt ports, start those in and snug them up. Double check to make sure that's secured. Now we're focusing on topping off our coolant. Now, to fill the cooling system, there's several different ways of doing so. You might have a specialty tool or something as basic as a coolant funnel. Either way, we're going to carefully open up our coolant cap. I'm using the funnel. We'll remove our small plunger. Continuing on, you want to use the manufacturer-specific coolant to top off the coolant. Once you find that there's no more air making its way up and out of the system, go ahead and reinstall the plunger, remove the funnel, and then reinstall the coolant cap. I'll be using universal coolant for this. Now I'm just going to exercise the two upper hoses here. That should help work out any air that might be trapped inside of these hoses. A tech tip, prior to removing your funnel, you're going to want to squeeze on your upper radiator hose. Once you're squeezing on that, you can install the plunger. Carefully pull this up and off of here, and that's going to help us prevent losing any coolant. Let's reinstall that cap. Turn it clockwise until it's completely locked in. Okay, friend, we finished the installation of our vehicle's throttle body. Now at this point, you're going to want to start and run the vehicle. If you find that you have a running condition, you might have to do a relearn procedure, and that's typically done with a scan tool. Aside from that, you want to take your vehicle for a road test and check for any coolant leaks. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.